Alright, at UFC 290 in Las Vegas, Dricus du Plessis did the seemingly impossible by getting the stoppage victory over Robert Whittaker, one of the greatest middleweights of all time, one of the most well-rounded fighters in the history of the middleweight division. And now the stage is set for Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya for the middleweight championship. This victory set the stage for a face-off with Israel Adesanya that was passionate, to say the least. Robert Whittaker had a lot of success in this fight. As a lot of people expected, Robert Whittaker was faster. On the feet, he was a lot sharper, putting together really fast combinations with his darting in and out footwork. But Dricus, being the absolute powerhouse that he is, even with his lower volume, his heavier strikes were able to get the better of a lot of the exchanges on the feet, especially his jab out of the southpaw stance. And even when Robert was landing good shots on Dricus, Dricus just kind of ate them and kept walking forward. And ultimately, with that pressure, Dricus was able to land a huge shot, get Robert to the ground, secure the stoppage victory and the title shot. First, we have to talk about that face-off. I know that had to make a lot of people very uncomfortable, especially since Dricus actually does kind of seem like a really respectful guy. I see people already saying that this face-off was a bad look for Israel Adesanya, but I think we have to back up for a second. Dricus is the one that kind of started this whole back and forth to begin with, by bringing up the whole bringing the belt back to Africa talk.
I'm going to take a belt to Africa. I'm the African fighter in the UFC.
As if the last three African-born, African-raised, African champions didn't bring their belts back to Africa. That being said, I think what Dricus was really doing here when he brought that up was try to lay the groundwork for a compelling story to gain interest in a matchup between Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya. If you think about it, before the fight between Dricus and Robert Whittaker, Dricus had yet to look all that good in any of his fights. Look back at his fight against Darren Till, his fight against Derek Brunson, Dricus looked really sloppy. And while he did secure the win in those fights, I don't think anyone looked at that and thought that he did anything to stand out as someone who deserved a title shot, especially given the fact that there's guys out there like Sean Strickland who, say what you want about the guy, but he's really good at creating attention based off of what he says in the microphone. And pre the whole Dricus versus Israel beef, I think most people would have been on the same page that Adesanya versus Strickland is a way more compelling fight, which is going to end up making more money, which means it makes more sense. Now, I do think there is some level of authenticity behind the emotion of what Israel Adesanya is saying, but I think he's also kind of playing mind games with both the fans and himself. On paper, Dricus is nowhere near the biggest challenge that Israel has faced inside the octagon. From Jan Blachowicz, a big 205er who's really well-rounded, Robert Whittaker, a former champion, and maybe the only guy in the middleweight division that can come close to Israel's level of skill on the feet outside of Alex Pereira, the guy that already had the confidence coming in of knowing that he already beat him twice, even 3 times before. I think deep down, Israel needs a way to feel motivated about this fight and to get other people interested in this fight. Otherwise, I think a lot of people would just look at it and go, well, this is probably going to be a relatively easy fight for Adesanya. To my point, Israel was on Andrew Schultz's podcast not that long ago, talking about how if Robert Whittaker was able to get this victory and Israel was forced to fight Robert Whittaker for a 3rd time, he was going to try to make the fight more interesting by only going in there and looking for a submission victory.
I got to make it interesting for myself. I'm going to submit him.
Which kind of, in a weird way, reminds me of Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier 2 in Abu Dhabi. Because if you remember, in that fight, the big thing that everyone took away was that Conor went in there with a boxing approach and a boxing stance. And I think part of that might have been that once you get to a certain point, you become a champion multiple times over, you have all the money, you become an icon in the sport, a bona fide Hall of Famer. Sometimes it takes a little bit more to get motivated. I think Israel knows that he has less than 5 fights left, and I think he's going to have a hard time beating the level of fan interest and even personal motivation that he had in the rematch versus Alex Pereira. All that being said, I think there's a chance that, as uncomfortable as that face-off might have been, we are in for a much more uncomfortable build-up towards that fight in September that could get much uglier. But at the end of the day, that is to be expected because we really are watching the world's most masculine soap opera. Thanks for watching.